stops the run.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Huddle Up with the Huskies. This is episode 3 of 5 total podcasts created for this very unusual year. It's also the first episode where I figured out where the camera is on my laptop. So now I'm actually looking at you. There you are. I see you. Thank you for joining us. We're trying to bring some focus back to the football club. We're trying to connect with you, the fans, the alumni, the community at large, to help the team, which, like so many others, really took a hit during COVID. If you missed the first 2 episodes, no problem. You can view them at any time over on YouTube. Just do a search for Huddle Up with the Huskies, and they will be there. And you can watch them at any time. And if this is your first time watching, welcome. We're so glad to have you along. We have some amazing guests on this episode. We will take a trip down memory lane with 3 former longtime coaches with the program. We were lucky enough to be joined by Bart Arnold and Ed Carelton and Darell Burko. And I personally just felt lucky to be even a part of this conversation or sit in on this conversation as they reminisced about their years and years with the team and with the program. We will also see an appearance from Brad Wall, former premier of the province of Saskatchewan. He will be along to tell us about the Starting 24, which of course is the fundraising initiative with the team. But first up, we have the Great Western Brewery quick hitter, and we have Wray Morrison here to give us an update. We're almost halfway through the season, and Wray is here to walk us through the first 2 games. And Wray, thank you so much for joining us on the program. We are 1-1 so far on the regular season, and they're coming off a resounding win over BC in week 2. What looked different to you than in the week 1 loss to Calgary?
Well, a couple of things. I think the big thing for me was offensively just the depth that was on display. I mean, there aren't many games in the season, Holly, where Adam Mackert isn't leading the team in rushing, but Josh Iwanchino was terrific in the backfield. The Holy Cross graduate was fantastic. Number 1 on your program, in your heart, and in the rushing totals, right? So that was kind of neat to see because it gave Adam a little bit of rest. The offensive line, they looked really good again at opening up holes for the run game and protection for the pass game, so that was good. And then just that display of versatility. You know, you're kind of waiting for Colton Clausen to be dominant through a whole football game, and he did finish up with second-half touchdowns, which I guess we shouldn't be surprised at. But just, you know, the depth of a guy like Sam Baker or Daniel Perry or some of the other weapons that Mason Nyes has to work with, they were on display in full force. So that was the big thing that kind of stood out to me is you look back at the weaponry and you go, man, you go on the road and you put up 43 points. That's pretty good. And, you know, UBC, they're up against it. That they're a young team. They got some great young athletes over there, Holly. But a win, I'm not surprised at. But when you're 10, 11 minutes in and all of a sudden it's 14-0 on the road, you go, oh, there they are. There was that team that we didn't see in Calgary that all of a sudden came up with a big road effort here.
Yeah, and you mentioned the offense, and of course, you mentioned Mason Nyes, who was a guest with us on episode number 2, and the Huskies quarterback was named the Canada West Offensive Player of the Week. So what stood out to you about his play?
And the U Sports Player of the Week as well. You know, I think one of the things about Mason was just, you know, sort of the poise that he tried to show against Calgary, but that defense is awfully good when you're on the road. But that poise, and he had time to kind of make the plays, right? He's a veteran guy. The nice thing for the Huskies, Holly, is he's got 1 more year after this. He's a 4th-year guy. But, you know, he played like a 5th-year veteran in the pocket, and it was just looked a little more like Mason. And in the Ultimate Team game, Scott Flory said it best. He said, you know, we look more like ourselves all the way around. And Mason, too, he wasn't under siege. He had time to get the ball out through the passing game. And so that was good. So Mason looked more like Mason. I wasn't surprised to see that effort. I was surprised to kind of see, like I said, the versatility on offense that Mason was able to use was certainly impressive if you're a Huskies fan.
Well, again, this is an unusual year, and maybe he needed that game to get it under his belt and feel comfortable again. But it's certainly, from my perspective, seeing him on the episode, he seems like a leader, definitely a leader. Also seems like a lot of fun, which not every leader is, but he obviously seems like he's having fun and looks comfortable there. So the Huskies round out their regular season with 3 of the 4 games at home. How big of an advantage is that?
I think it's huge. Scott Flory's totally downplaying that. So that shows you what the broadcaster knows, right, Holly? He said,
nothing. We know nothing.
Yeah, Scott told me after the game, I said, you probably weren't all that impressed when the season started because you opened with 2 on the road, 1 against the defending Hardy Cup champions. But now you're 1-1 and you have 3 of 4 at home. That's got to be impressive. He downplayed that so much. And one of the articles that I put up on HuskyFan.ca, the post-game report, he said, yeah, that doesn't guarantee a W playing at home. He said, we have to work as hard here as we do on the road. So he wasn't having any of that conversation. I personally think it's huge, though. I think for the opportunity to kind of get settled in, knowing that you've got the impressive Griffith Stadium home crowd behind you for some games that might be pretty tough when you look at the schedule. I mean, Alberta, they've come up with some nice surprises here. So this game this weekend is going to be really intriguing to watch. Regina's played okay, and then they end the season against the Calgary Dinos. A team that they've lost back-to-back games to, one in the Hardy Cup last year and one to kick off the year this year, right? So Scott might have a point. I think there's an advantage to being at home, though. And so that's, I think that's going to set this team up with a better than 500 chance to be hosting a playoff game, whether it's 1 or 2 in the Canada West.
And certainly great for the home crowd to have that many opportunities come out and cheer the team on. So they're coming off the bye week. And how big was that? Do you think that came at the right time over the Thanksgiving weekend?
Yeah, I really do. I think, being around the team this week with that Alberta game just hours or days away, depending on when our viewers are looking at it, I do. I think it was a confidence builder. I ride the defensive bus when I travel with the team. And the defensive players were talking a little bit about, how there's still a little bit of work to do. Some of the coaches are saying that defensively, there's some things that on tape, on film, they have to shore up a little bit. But there's certainly a much more confident group coming home and fired up and ready to go than they were after that Calgary game.
Okay, and then what threats, the next game, University of Alberta, what threats do the Golden Bears have, and how are the Huskies going to deal with that?
Well, when we talk about defense and having to play a little bit stronger, I think one of the things that you have to be mindful of it from the Alberta Golden Bears standpoint is Matt Pearson is one of their running backs, and he rushed for 96 yards in a loss to the Manitoba Bison. So obviously there's a threat on the ground there that the Huskies, the interior, will have to be mindful of. I think the secondary is in good shape. Charlie Ringland spent a little bit of time in the UBC backfield on the blitz and putting on some pressure, so that was good. But I think sort of that front 7 will be interesting to watch, and it'll be intriguing. They played a 3-4 defense the first 2 games, and I wonder if they might switch that up and maybe go to a 4-3 a little bit just to counter that run. So we'll see how many players they bring up front. Defensively, that'll be up to Warren Musica, the 99 Grey Cup champion, to decide, the defensive coordinator. But nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see the adjustments that they make.
Okay, well, thank you so much for this. It's so great to have your expert opinion. Well, I mean, depending on who you ask, I guess.
That's right. That's right.
Right. As broadcasters, we're just here for a little gab, I guess. But I wanted to mention that for all things Huskies, you can check out Wray Morrison, and also your son. Is your son on the various podcasts as well?
Well, my son is the host analyst for the home game, so he did it the last 2 years. And now that we've launched the Husky Fan app at HuskyFan.ca, it's a free download. The app, he's my home analyst, so he's a broadcaster by trade and knows this team inside out. So we are having a lot of fun. As long as he can continue to put up with the old man here, we'll be good.
That's always the big question, isn't it? Yeah, no, but I was going to say, for all things Huskies, please check out the Husky Fan app. And Ray, we will check in with you on episode number 4. Thanks for joining us.
Sounds great. Great to see you, Holly.
All right, next up, we have a very special trip down memory lane with three coaches who were a part of many of the glory years of the football program. I was joined by Bart Arnold, Ed Carlton, and Darell Burko. And the gentlemen talked about how the coaching staff came together and really worked so well during all those years. They talked about their fondest memories as coaches. They talked about specific games and even some that still keep them up at night. They talked about players who they felt really stood out to them and really made an impact with the program. And they talked about what is the biggest change they see between their years with the team and what football is today. So I hope you enjoy. Here they are. And pleased now to be joined by three former coaches from what we would probably call the glory years of the program. Beside me, we have Darell Burko, a former DB coach. He's in the car there. And below him is Bart Arnold, who is the former offensive line coach and professor still at the U of S. And beside him is Ed Carlton, affectionately known as Bomber for reasons we're not going to get into, who was the former defensive coordinator. And Ed, we were talking before this started, and we were trying to figure out what the timeline was that the three of you overlapped as coaches, and you think it was about 25 years?
Yeah, it'd be pretty close, I think. And Darell was my coach when I played, so he's been there even longer. But I started up a couple of years before Bart, and we were there for at least 20 years, or 20 plus years.
Well, I know a lot of people will say that the longevity of the coaching staff is maybe one of the reasons that the program had such success. Would you agree with that? Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a big part of. I know when other teams were trying to mimic what we were doing, a big part of what they did was talk about how could they keep their coaches around a little longer, because we saw that in our league. The teams that went through a rotating door of coaches, you couldn't keep very much consistency. And some people will say that's a bad thing too, because you get stale and do the same thing over and over again. But it worked pretty good for us, and we all got along well. And I think it brought a nice bit of stability to what we were doing there.
Bart, can I ask you, so much is always made about how a team comes together and the chemistry of the team and how they gel and the personalities, but we don't talk so much about the coaches and how they gel. So how did that bond come about for you?
Yeah, there definitely was a bond. And just as a bit of maybe interesting information, like Darell was actually my high school coach. I don't know if you remember that, Bert. I was that slow
How can I
linebacker.
forget
He's
Bart?
selling you out here, Darell.
Yeah, exactly. But and again, you have to give credit to BT in a lot of ways. I mean, he recruited former players, coaches that were involved in football, and he saw how everyone would work together, and he did a great job of getting together a group of guys, diverse, but everyone got along, and there was a really, I think, a strong friendship that was formed really quick. You heard stories about some other coaching staffs where there'd be offense coaches and defense coaches there'd be a lot of animosity between the two, and that was never the case. We had some arguments, but it was always it was always friends first, and we worked really well together. And I think that's a big part of the success.
And Darell, maybe I'll ask you, you alluded to the trials and tribulations. Were there stumbling blocks? How did you handle that? Was there strategic bonding sessions where you all got together and kind of went over the overall philosophy of the team, or how did that happen?
No, I think it happened more organically than that. Like it just sort of developed. Like it, there didn't seem to be, at times, there didn't seem to be like a concrete plan that everyone could see, but everyone seemed to believe in have the same values. It sort of happened naturally, and it developed over time. And I think one of the big parts of it was that there wasn't a lot of, not saying that people weren't ambitious, but everyone was very secure and comfortable in their own roles on the coaching staff. Like, the coordinator didn't want to be the head coach. The area coaches didn't want to take the coordinator's job. Everyone was really comfortable and then worked within those roles really well. But it did happen, I think, just organically, and a lot of it was BT. A lot of with BT is things happen, and you don't think there's a plan, but BT has always got a plan that we may not see, but it's there.
Okay, all right, that sounds great. I'll stay with you since you apparently have been coaching the longest. Going back over those years, what would you say are your fondest memories of coaching?
Well, other than coaching Bart in Evan Hardy Souls in 1980, what year was that, Bart? 82, 83?
Oh,
One?
yeah, I think 82, 83.
Sorry to put you on the spot. And now I've forgotten the question, Holly. What was the fondest?
What are your fondest memories of coaching?
Oh God, I spent a fair bit of time with, and these two guys would know, Les McFarland. He was a great Husky back in the 70s, and all Canadian safety, great player. And he was sort of reminded me that we can't remember too many games. I mean, as coaches, we remember the big games, the Vanier Cups, and so on, but we remember just about everything else, like all the camaraderie, the social part of it, the friendship part of it, the friendship after the games. And I think, as players, we remembered that. And as coaches, that's the part that I mean, the fact that we could have won 2 more Vanier Cups, whatever, like all of those things are really, really secondary to the fact that of the close friendships that we've all formed, and including with these 2 other guys, and even in spite of the fact that Bart's on offense, we still like them as coaches over there. But that would be the highlight for sure.
Mm-hmm. Bart, would you agree? Is that more, the stuff that happens between the lines, so to speak?
Yeah, to be honest, I had to go back and do a little bit of Google searching because, again, 2004, 2007, it all kind of gets murky. And some of the details, when I look back, some of the memories come back from specific games, but absolutely, it's the coaches' meetings. It was which weren't necessarily at the clubhouse, may have been at Alexander's or somewhere else. And, the post-game get-together we'd have and start watching the film. And it was just, it was a really enjoyable experience. And lifelong friends have been developed. And those are the things really are, I think even from a player's standpoint, it's the things that happen in the locker room before practice. And yeah, the practice was great and the games are great, but it's those friendships and some of the stories that some of them we certainly can't share, but some really interesting, fun times and really the opportunity to meet some amazing people.
Yeah, absolutely. You hear it time and time again from athletes that once they're done, their playing days, it's the camaraderie that they miss. It's the locker room. Ed, what do you remember?
Yeah, you talked about getting together as coaches. We used to have coaching retreats just about yearly. There was one in particular. At the Burko family cabin that Burke dubbed the coaching surrender, not the coaching retreat. Yeah. We'd get about 3 or 4 good hours of football in, and then it was about a day and a half of fun, and everyone got along so well. And yeah, you can't replace how well we got along and worked together. And I think that mirrored through to the players. They saw that, and just seeing those, you get some players, they get there when they're 18 years old and they're men already. They're strong as everyone else. They're very mature, but most of the time you get 18-year-old kids and they're not very strong. They're not very fast. They're not very mature yet. But to see them grow into men and to see them out in the community now and the things they do and see them coaching football when I do all this minor football now, those are all real good memories.
Yeah, very rewarding, I would imagine. All right, well, I'll have to put you on the spot here that even though you say it's all the games are a blur, if you could go back and relive one game out of all of those years, what would be your number one? Ed?
Yeah, those the games aren't really blurred to me. I remember most of them pretty succinctly.
Oh.
Maybe I'm different, but in some of them you think back and you just have that feeling again of how nice it felt. Everything came together. But I think a lot about the 2005 Vanier Cup in Laurier. We lost that game by a point with no time left on a long field goal they made, and I don't think we should have ever lost that game. But credit to them, they pulled it out. But we had so many chances to finish that game off. And dropped an interception that was right in our hands. So we had the ball on offense and probably didn't take enough time off the clock at the end. And then we had them with hardly any time left, 3rd and 18, and I would just like to have that one defensive call back on 3rd and 18 because they converted it. But so yeah, that's one game I think about a lot.
Oh, that sounds like a recurrent nightmare. Yikes. Okay.
It is.
Bart, do you have any happier memories of a game?
Yeah, I was doing some thinking about that, and I'll be like Ed and talk about a game we lost in the '94 Vanier Cup to Western and double overtime. It was in part because in 1989 was our first U of S's first trip to the Vanier Cup, and I was there as a player. Ed, you were there, and we couldn't get the job done, and it was Western and Larry Haler, and again, was not my favorite school to think about. And here's our chance in '94 to kind of get redemption, and things didn't start out very well in that game. I remember Brent Schneider, quarterback, just absolutely went crazy in the 3rd quarter, and I had to look it up, but he threw for 220 some yards in the 4th quarter it was. And so we came storming back, and again, I think at the end of that game was a punt return, I think it was, that they returned, and probably a missed call. Heartbreaking, but that game will forever live in my mind. And then the other one, 2002, we were 4-4, and you guys remember this, going into Manitoba and playing. I think they were undefeated that year. A team loaded with all-stars, and we just went in there, and I remember the call was like, we're going to shock the nation. And we had our little counter going, and I think Dave Stevens, Tyler O'Gorman, I think, and we just rolled. And those games really stand out for me. And one's a loss, one was a win, but it's just the guys that just lifted themselves up and put us in a situation where we could do some great things.
That's amazing. And Darell?
Well, they took both my stories, actually. The two that I were thinking of were those two exact games, and for opposite reasons, obviously. The one was, one of probably the biggest heartbreak, the Laurier. And then the other one was like the highest, the highest of highs. Like, as Bart said, we were 4-4. They were 8-0. They had guys like Israel Adange and, NFL star, and great team. And we just absolutely destroyed them. What's it, 35-19? Would that have been the score? Ed, do you remember?
Yeah,
it was a decisive win. And then because we just to cap it off, and Fraser Sutherland had a friend. We had to fly to the game because we didn't, the playoff situation was so uncertain right to the end. We usually bus, and the half a dozen of us got to fly back on Fraser Sutherland's friend's private jet with a cooler full of bourbon and whatever else was in there, Scott. And we touched Saskatoon about 45 minutes after, about an hour and a half after the game. And it was like, this is really living. Like, man, this is maybe what University of Texas does to get home. And we had this great party. We flew home, had the great party at Fraser Sutherland's hangar. He was Chris Sutherland, his offensive lineman, his dad, a great supporter. And it was that whole event, the game, which was amazing. And then the flight home, and then the big party. It was great. Then we went in to beat the Rams the next weekend. I think they had finished second in the longest game in history. But yeah, I guess those two games, from a high point and a low point, those are pretty. Those are the two that came to mind for me.
And a
then we
taste of
beat
a highlight.
McGill. Then we beat McGill after that, Burke, too. We had this little 4-4 team. We were rebuilding. We weren't very good. Everyone said we were going to lose to Manitoba. We were going to lose 3 Giants. Then we went to Montreal, and McGill had like 7 All-Canadians on offense. They said they'd score 50 points on us. They'd kill us. BT's father passed away, so he wasn't with us all week. And we beat them 22-0.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was a great run, great ride. 3 or 4 weeks of the best football ever. Yeah.
And maybe speaking of heartbreak, because that seems to be the theme here. How about 2003 when we were 8-0 and we lose both of our quarterbacks to Alberta, and we had Aaron David, 5'6", running the offense, and we won the game except for a really questionable flip on Tyler Seawack running like 80-90 yards. And we would have beat
we lost the game 8-7.
Just a crazy game.
And that was our first undefeated season ever.
Yeah,
that's right.
Wow. Stats. All 3 of you have touched on specific players, and that's kind of the focus of the next question is, without calling anyone out specifically, were there players along the way that exceeded your expectations in some way, whether it was performance, whether it was growth as a person, and you specifically talked about the maturity level or the strength coming in for a lot of the players and what they were like when they started versus what they were like at the end, or players who really left a significant impact on the program itself. Bart, maybe if we can start with you for this one.
Yeah, I already mentioned his name, and one of the guys that comes to mind, because I remember what spring camp was like his first year with us, that was Tyler Seawack. And I think we all kind of went like, here's this rough around the edges kid from PA, had some talent, but boy, not sure, if this is really going to be a long-term fit for him. And perseverance, dedication, Tyler stuck through it. Tyler ended up being a very, very, very good football player. Grew as an individual. Is now working in the healthcare field in Saskatoon and doing really, really well. And again, I think the program really did a lot for someone like Tyler, and and he did a lot for the program in return. From a performance perspective, and Ed, both you guys would probably appreciate this. Like I would have loved to see Mike Letendre play multiple years. I think if Mike wouldn't have had the neck injury, I think we would talk about maybe the greatest defensive player to play at the U of S. He was just an amazing football player, real good team guy, and unfortunately we didn't get to really see how good he could be because of an injury. But that's a couple guys. I coached the offensive line with Travis Turk, and we were fortunate. We always had tons of talent, and Ben Heenans and Patty Newfelds and Kelly Bates and all those guys, Sutherland, and we always had some really outstanding players. It was our job just to not screw it up too much because we didn't really have to coach them a ton. But those guys stand out for me.
Yeah, that's a good point, is that sometimes you just have to get out of their way, and sometimes you need to take more time with them. So that's an interesting choice as a coach as to which way you're going to go. Ed, who stands out in your mind?
Yeah, Mike Letendre was talented. Like Bart alluded to it. We only had him for 1 year. He came out of juniors football in BC, and we put him in a spot on defense he really had never played before, and he just excelled. He actually won the President's Trophy, the National Defensive Player of the Year in 1 year. And we lost him in the last game of the regular season. It hurt us in the playoffs not having him. But I had so many great guys come through there, Colin Dutton, Warren Muzica, right up there, the skill level of Letendre, Joe Saul, Brent Dancy, defense. So many, because I was a coordinator, I got to work with so many great players. But the one situation I thought of was I looked out on the field one time. We were at home, and our 3 starting linebackers never had played 12-man football before. One was from Atonia, Chad Giddinger. One was from Delisle, Eric Grisdale. and one was from Unity, Taylor Wallace. And 3 better young men that put their heart and soul into the program, and to see them out there, that was pretty cool.
That's amazing. Darell, what would you say stands out in your mind?
Yeah, again, it's just there's so many. But I thought of a couple of different sort of different angles, like going way back to I guess the early '80s or late '80s. A guy you mentioned, who exceeded expectations. Well, Phil Giebert was a safety that became an All-Canadian and lit up the league with interceptions, and he had been cut. I wish I could remember the details, but I think he was cut by our program about 3 times, and then he'd go off and he'd try there, and he got and because he kind of bounced back and forth, and he never just never made the team. And then one year we needed a kicker, and he said, well, I can kick. So he came out and tried out as a kicker, made the team as a kicker, and then started playing, show team defense safety, and eventually worked his way onto the roster and the starting, safety, and then an All-Canadian. Like he went from just a place where he couldn't even make the team to be an All-Canadian and a great safety, and he was a really important part of that defense over those years. And Ed and Bart, I'm sure you would agree with that. The other guy, and this is sort of it's a sad story, and again, an underrated guy, and he was only with our program for a couple of years, was Justin Filto, a guy that came from the Hilltops, and he died tragically in a plane crash just about a year ago, a couple of years ago. And he was absolutely underrated, I think, every day of his life. He was a short, stocky little guy. He didn't look very athletic. He didn't seem to move very athletically. But every time you put him on the field, we'd throw him on the field, he'd get an interception. We'd throw him on the field, he'd get a fumble recovery. He'd make a big tackle. And he, again, kind of came from sort of nowhere to a place where he was a really good player with us, with the Huskies. And then he had some injury problems later on as well, and didn't get as many years out of Justin as we had hoped. And as I said, a tragic plane crash took his life a little while ago. But again, those two out of maybe hundreds of stories that we could dig up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And as you said, it's a case where the program can have an effect on a player, and a player can have an effect on the program, and it goes both ways. We're running out of time here, gentlemen. Just one final question. What is the biggest change that you see now in today's university game versus when you were coaching? Bart, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, from a coaching perspective, and I would say it's part of the reason that I stepped away from coaching a few years ago. Is just I've never coached at a pro level, but I'm not sure how the pros could really put in a lot more time than what the staffs do in college, and certainly at the U of S. And that's one of the things with the technology that's available. There's just so many things to be analyzed. I don't know how Ed did it, and Schneids and our offensive coordinators, because there's an endless amount of numbers and things that you could boil down to try to get that edge. But again, it was just the time commitment. It was every day till you get home at 9:00. Tough on a young family, and but again, you can see it made an impact in the quality of the football that's being played is absolutely outstanding.
Ed, how did you do it? You obviously seem like a stats guy, but is that the biggest change that you see now?
Yeah, well, early on early on it was time, because you had to pencil and eraser everything, and hours, and later on we got the good programs and the good the films and the computers, and you could spreadsheet and do a lot more stuff. But then it became a what do you do with all that information? You have to narrow that down to what was more important, what would be used in a better way. So So it changed like that. We went from being very basic to almost having too much information, getting things done. But, football wise, the evolution of, I've seen it go from when I played, we played against tight ends all the time. And when true tight ends that run block that didn't get a lot of balls thrown their way, it was just kind of like a sixth O lineman. And got that early in my coaching career. And then they completely went away and it was all 5 and 6 receiver sets, no tight ends. Back to now they have these big H backs, which are like big fullbacks, which are actually just tight ends a lot of the time too. So it's came full circle. This is a lot of the things that football do, and I've seen some changes that way. For sure.
Mm-hmm. And Darell, you get the last word. What's the biggest change that you've seen?
Oh, yeah. Looking at it more from a player's perspective, I think just the physical development of the players, the size and strength of these guys now compared to, back when I started there, in the 70s and 80s. It's just unbelievable, the strength and speed of these young players coming even out of high school. And I think that sort of leads to my second point, which is that I think back in the day, you could have a really good team and have a few weak areas, maybe a suspect O-line or D-line or secondary, whatever, and you could make up for it. It's so competitive now that if you don't have strength, solid strength in every aspect of the game, you're just not going to win. And I think those two things are connected, just the physical development of these players coming out and the depth of the good teams, of the teams that end up winning championships.
I think that's probably true of sports in general, just the overall strength
Mm-hmm.
and skill and competitive nature. You could pick any sport nowadays, and it's really been a game changer. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you gentlemen, and I know it's probably bringing back a lot of great memories for everyone watching, for the fans. So just been great hearing from you. Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the season yourself.
Thanks,
Thank
Holly.
you.
Thanks, Holly.
And I hope that brought back a lot of great memories for many of you out there. And thank you to the three gentlemen that I was a part of it at all. There is obviously still a bond there from all their many years together. Finally, today on the podcast, we need to talk about the Starting 24, which is the fundraising initiative for the team. And joining us, making an appearance for that, is Mr. Brad Wall. Hailing from Swift Current, Brad was a former premier of the province of Saskatchewan from 2007 to 2018. He now works as an advisor for a law firm in Calgary. He is a proud U of S alumnus and a longtime Husky football fan. So take it away, Mr. Wall.
I remember hearing about the Starting 24 for the first time at the Thanks to BT event that I had the pleasure of being at in Saskatoon and wanted to be a part of it for a couple reasons. I mean, there's sort of the obvious and more present reason, which is it supports the program. It supports one of Canada's premier college football programs. At my university, but at Saskatchewan's largest university at the U of S. So that's a great reason. But the second part of that is because of the effectiveness of the program, because of the philosophy of the football program under BT and now Coach Flory as well. It really is more. You're supporting more than just football, than more than just a great football team and program. You're supporting. He's supporting an organization that is focused on training up, coaching up, raising up, inspiring great young men. I know I can count to so many who have gone through, who played football for the U of S Huskies and gone through the University of Saskatchewan, who I think credit their time with the football team and what they learned with much of the success that they've had in their lives. And those individuals that I'm thinking of have contributed mightily to the entire province, to their cities, to their province, sometimes to other provinces. I guess we'll give them that. So there's a good, you can be a part of that. the starting 24, and what a great reason to give a little bit. So I hope people will consider being a part of it today.
And that does it for another episode of Huddle Up with the Huskies, episode number 3 in the books. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are almost halfway through the regular season, hard to believe, and we hope you are enjoying the return of Husky football. Our next podcast will be October 27th, where the theme will be women in football, and we have some amazing guests on that episode, so you will want to tune in to hear what they have to say. Until then, thank you for watching. Thank you for all of your support for the team. And go Huskies.
Stands, delivers, touchdown, Green Dogs! Here comes the run.